Hello, viewers. Good afternoon. Well, I am not a big fan of Western writers and scholars, but one time JF Kennedy had this to say. He said that the peace and stability in the USA can only be maintained and sustained if there's peace and stability across the world. Of course, this was informed by the unending conflict that they had. Of course, the First World War, Second, and many others. So they believed that peace and stability is very important across the world. Well, back to our context here in Uganda, our neighbors just next door seem to have an ending conflict, that is the Democratic Republic of Congo, more so in its eastern part, Goma. Well, today the Youth Roundtable convenes to explore this conversation and have an in-depth analysis on the conflict in DRC Congo and how it affects the region, but above all, the continent at large. Viewers, I'm joined by a panel of distinguished, celebrated young people of this country that is now my honor and pleasure to introduce to you. A former Guild Speaker of Makerere University, but now a lawyer. Isaac Kwagala is the name, and joins us for the first time on the Youth Roundtable. Isaac, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thanks for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you very much. Next to Isaac is a face that you've seen before if you are a religious follower of the Civic Space TV, but she has appeared on some other show. But well, this is Jakie Batamuliza. Jakie is a research associate at GLISS. Jakie, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
What is GLISS in full again?
Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Next to Jakie is an equally a first timer on this show, Sandra Tushabe, who is a student at Makerere University. Sandra, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you too.
How do you feel being amidst these people?
Quite exciting. Yeah, being my first time here, it's quite exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Then the last but not least is someone who shares a name with the person I just quoted earlier on. He's called Gimei John Kennedy. He's a lawyer as well. Kennedy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you. Jakie, let me just begin with you. You do research and all that. So I have to assume that you've done research around the conflict in Congo. Just to kick us off, for the benefit of the viewer who has no idea about what is happening in Congo and where we find ourselves today, what is the genesis? Is it the Mobutu factor, the 24 years of Mobutu? Or what exactly is it, the resources in Congo?
I think I think generally the world has the Congo crisis as a general. They look at it from a general perspective, but I think there are different strands within. It's a cobweb of things. There's the colonial factor, which in essence means how the boundaries were drawn, with what objectives, and who did this. Number two, there's an identity and ethnicity problem, which also has roots in how the boundaries were drawn, and then later on in the weakness and the strength or strengths of the governments that came later, which is also another problem, the weakness of the state, the weakness of the security forces. And then there's a resource problem, which also has origins in the who drew the boundaries of DRC, but also the interest that the militias and different armed groups and every other person has interest in the DRC. So it's a problem that has more than 5 heads. And it's not really accurate to place it against something specific, because every one of these things has their descriptions and particular origins. The problem of ethnicity might not have been a problem now had the people who drew the boundaries and those who took over government acknowledged what the role of ethnicity was going to play. And for the fact that M23, for example, right now, which is the primary problem, has risen or has been when it was constituted, it was about an identity problem, a sense of belonging, resource sharing, land shortages, and even that has it has its origins in how the Mobutu government managed, or actually sort of accepted them. There's been a couple of amendments over the years on how, on who is acknowledged as a Congolese or who is not. So when the boundaries were drawn, there were the Mulenge people who were found themselves on the Congolese side, who were Banyarwanda. So today we know them as the Banyamulenge. Over the years, it's been very difficult for them to be accepted within the Congo, and they're regarded as foreigners. That might not have been a problem, but when the crisis of genocide happened in the late 1950s, 1958, 59, when the Banyarwanda were running away from the genocide at the time by Kaibanda and that whole crisis at the time, some of whom actually took off to Uganda and other neighboring countries, Burundi, Tanzania. Some found themselves in the Congo. Now, when the DRC, for example, I think there was an amendment on there was a decree in 1971 about the ethnic groupings that are accepted as Congolese. Banyarwanda in the Congo were, I think they felt like it was a mask or a... So, but when the 1994 genocide happened and the remnants of the Hutu genocide fighters or militias crossed into the Congo, I think the crisis changed face. Because it now became Rwanda's obligation as a matter of national defense and security to ensure that these militias never return to Rwanda, which is what sort of justified the first and the second Congo wars, which are 1998 and I think 2002, 2003. So I believe...
In a nutshell.
Yeah, I believe from a strategic perspective, Rwanda recognizing... I don't have to mention how they Uganda and Rwanda ended up participating in how to remove Mobutu and how they constituted the first Kabila and then how the son comes into power. Maybe I don't have to get into that. So I believe that for Kigali to have determined, to have been that determined to actually take part in the formation of the DRC government was fundamentally for their own security.
As rapporteur?
Yes, I am. But then you have to look at this, that inside Rwandan government, they have every reason to believe that the people who instigated the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda also have power over DRC. So when the formation of M23 with the objective of defending the Banyarwanda ethnic group in DRC, for me, had I been a Rwandan president, would be like an advantage. So now that is where the crisis is.
So you fight the battle from far away from home,
rather
than bring it close to your doorstep.
Exactly. And
I want to bring in Isaac. I think you've given us a very good background, but I want to just hear from Isaac.
No, before probably Isaac comes in. So we have an international perception problem right now that every time M23 rises to fight, it has to be Kagame, especially on social media. I think that in there, is where the actual crisis is. That if M23 has to defend itself, a sovereign state has to be pursued for that, even if they were, by the way, even if Rwanda was guilty. Yeah, I think there has to be mechanisms of actually, for the international community or the UN or UNESCO or whichever institution is interested with this job, or even the East African community, verifying and actually proving that Rwanda is actually involved. Because without that, we could have Rwanda turned into another bigger problem than the one we are having.
Okay, thank you. Fair enough. Isaac, let me just come to you. Someone has said, okay, I've heard from a professor who said that if Africa is a rifle, DRC is the trigger. That the moment the conflict in DRC expands, it could have a continental effect. But let me just hear from you. What do you know about this conflict? You've heard from Jakie, but I want to hear in your own words. What do you know about this?
Thank you, Moses, once again. I think Jakie has done a great job propounding on the history of the conflict. I would say that upon a careful examination of the Congo crisis and the attendant turbulent history, it points to the inescapable conclusion that this is largely a political issue or question. Admittedly, it might have other facets like the persistent humanitarian crisis. Then there is also now the existent military conflict amongst the different warring parties, what we call militias or the rebel outfit in the M23. But for a fact, substantially, it's a political question. But more crucially, I think that in order for us to understand this issue, we need to reflect back on the time and get to question what's the motivation of the crisis. If we understand the motivation, then I think we are in a good position to also recommend solutions to the problem. The conflict in Congo has persisted since independence. Just shortly after the declaration of independence, then there were internal political contestations and struggles. Then after there, we had the problem of Mobutu. When Mobutu was overthrown, we now thought that we would have stability and order, but then we have, over time, a weaker state, which cannot administer peace and stability across the entire breadth and width of the country. And then now emerge different power centers on the peripheries to destabilize the peace. And that's the problem that we have, the current M23. So to me, I think that Congo's problem is more reflective of the general, grim political reality of Africa. And we should not make the mistake of divorcing the Congo problem from the general political context of Africa, because we have not designed robust political systems that can resolve emerging conflicts amongst the different players. So why Congo is unique is because of the longevity of time, but also the different players it has attracted. You see in Congo, you have the Congolese government, you have the militias or the different rebel outfits, you have the neighbors that have real interest. It could be political or economic, but most importantly, you have the international community. There are various players, and this, mostly it's the economic interest. So Congo is not an isolated scenario. So I would hold the view that it's important going forward for, first and foremost, Africa as a continent under its various bodies like the AU, to build solid capacity to be able to address challenges like the Congo question. But also, secondly, Congo, we need to approach the crisis in Congo in a sense that we should first help Congo as a state to build capacity to stand on its own. Yes, people are proposing and making interventions, but is this sustainable? Can it bring about durable and lasting peace in the country? So for me, I think we should only intervene to aid the Congolese people to be able to some sort of craft homegrown strategies and solutions that can empower the state, first and foremost, to administer governance. Then be able to prescribe peace and for a sustainable and durable period of time. Then we can only come in to intervene to reinforce those efforts. But so long as we still have a weak state in Congo, I do not think the current proposals and the efforts that are being undertaken can really achieve much.
Can I come in on that?
Later. You will?
Because
you
I
will,
think
Jackie?
you need... No, there's a factual correction I want to make.
Okay.
With respect, Isaac, I think we've tried this before. When Uganda and Rwanda instituted the first Kabila, that was a strategy. They even, Rwanda assigned General Kabarebe to head and form a strong army in the DRC. But what I think happened is that even DRC did not have the independence required to be loyal to whatever agreements that they had had or promises they had shared with each other. With each other meaning Rwanda, DRC, and I think I can also mention Uganda. Yeah. So I think we've tried that solution before, but there seems to be a problem. Is DRC capable of being independent? I think that's a question we need to ask them.
Good question. Isaac?
If I could make a rebuttal, just a short one.
Okay, 30 seconds.
With respect, Jackie, I think you make a correct observation, but we need to realize that the different players that have intervened in Congo over time, specifically in respect of Uganda and Rwanda, there seem to be persistent questions on their motivations for their intervention. So I don't want us to appreciate the intervention in the context that almost all the time it's coming in good faith. I think at the time, the motivation was selfish and for what I'm going to justify. For Rwanda, like you correctly pointed out, they had an interest in securing their borders to ensure that the former remnants of the genocidal militias do not return. Of course, in the perspective of the national security and peace, we would say they were justified. And for Uganda, I think they came in to aid Rwanda in that effort. But presently, that's where our focus should be. Why should these two countries continue to, intervene with a veiled selfish interest in the conflict?
Good question. That we shall explore.
And I think that's what is
later.
triggering now mistrust and then all the other, developing problems.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Sandra, let me just come to you. I've come across a statement where someone said that Congo is too rich to be left alone. That if you look at the resources in Congo, our phones are made from, I think, lithium, which is found in Congo. Cobalt. Coltan, tin. It's so rich to be left alone. And there are people who have been described as conflict entrepreneurs, that they benefit from the conflict. And whereas Isaac is saying that we must enable or help Congo build a strong state, the question is, does the Congo political class, some of it, do they have interest in having a stable Eastern DRC Congo? Because if you look at the wealth that some of their leaders have attained over time, from the gold and all those things, you'd question whether there's actually interest from some of the national leaders to actually have peace in Eastern DRC. So just in your own words, do you think that the conflict in DRC is largely hinged on its wealth and natural resources? Could that be its biggest factor?
Well,
or you want to side with her who thinks that they're basically ethnic questions and all these things?
No, I would actually want to. There was a time I was watching someone who said Congo has a curse that it is carrying because of its wealth. So like everyone is eyeing Congo. You might think it's only the people in Congo wanting to get the wealth, the diamonds, the golds, and everything that is there. But then the issue is even the neighboring countries would want to have something to do with Congo. So I think the war that is happening right now is not just something, how can I say it, that is between the leaders in Congo, but it's something that the neighbors are also targeting. They might not come in directly to get involved, but I personally think there is something they are targeting. And it's, of course, it all comes back to the minerals in Congo. So I think the wealth in Congo actually attracts the neighbors to get involved in one way or the other, get involved into their issues, their business.
So literally someone would be right to indict, for example, the former presidents who have up to date. Actually, someone said that Kabila Jr., with the wealth he has, he can live, even if he didn't step at any workplace, he can live for the rest of his life, his family. I mean, they've accumulated so much wealth over time. So is your assertion, for example, an indictment on the Congo national leaders of the past, and perhaps someone can call them the comprado bourgeoisie? They are allies of those who are causing the conflict in Congo. So the leaders have themselves played a role.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. John Kennedy, let me come to you. Uganda, up to date, has not yet serviced the International Court of Justice decision or sanction that we got because of our accusations that went into Congo to, of course, try and bestow. Was it Patrice Lumumba?
No, it's actually, I think, the second Congo
yes
conflict.
Yes, but Uganda today has a fine to pay to DRC Congo. So are these accusations right, that Uganda has been meddling in the affairs of DRC for over time, but our meddling is not exactly on purified intentions, and that is why we have been accused of plundering timber and gold, and today we have a fine to pay? So are our interventions on a legitimate concern, or there are sinister motives under it?
Thank you for that wonderful question. But first of all, I would like to agree with my sister here, Sandra, when she says that Congo is laboring under a curse of sorts. There is a Greek mythical story is told of Sisyphus, where he was cast to roll the stone up and down the mountain for all his life. And I think Congo is laboring under this given curse, in a sense that, first of all, its resources, and being that it is such a vast piece of area, and that in a way has caused its government to be ineffective, and in a way influenced its neighbors to intermeddle with its affairs. So back to your question, when you look at the neighbors of Congo, also we must categorically state that it's not only the neighbors that are interested in the Congo resources. The international players are involved. Other players, some we may not know as per now. But with the neighbors, I believe there is one question, and it has been brought out clearly of late, and it is to do with the existential threat that Congo poses towards its neighbors. I think you've seen tweets by the first son of Uganda about how a certain tribe is suffering, because initially we had had the hopes and we had been led to believe that the M23 was fighting because they wanted better services than that. But over time, this conflict has evolved, and you're looking at sentiments to do with ethnicity, how they are cropping up. So I would agree that to some extent, there is a threat to the neighbors. You know, when a regime has been in power for quite some time, it tends to want to galvanize everything. So Congo, being the vast country it is, with a lot of forests and a lot of ungovernable areas, that has given room to rebel groups to camp there and be able to attack these given countries. I think that's when these countries have been able to enter into Congo. However, it is not necessarily that they want to stabilize Congo, but it's because they want to protect the regimes back home.
So, but hold up, Gimei, because if you look at the distance between Goma and Kigali, and you look at the distance between Goma and Kampala, vis-a-vis the distance between Goma and Kinshasa, you will notice that Goma is much more closer to Kampala and Kigali than it is to Kinshasa. So perhaps the legitimate concern of Uganda and Rwanda would be that Eastern Congo is much more closer to us. So our interest could perhaps be legitimate in terms of pacification and in terms of the security of Eastern Congo, because should there be lack of security, then like you said, it could spill over to Kigali and Kampala.
I agree with you to a large extent, because looking at the Albertine region of Uganda with the oil activities going on, that region needs peace for it to progress. And if as a country we are to carry on with our activities to do with extracting oil. However, I believe for the purposes of sovereignty, Congo should be empowered. And that's why I agree with the Nairobi summit that happened early this year. If we are to send in the East African standby force, let it go for purposes of stabilizing the Congo. Not necessarily countries sitting down and sending their own troops inside there. You find Rwanda is fighting, you find Uganda is in there to look for ADF, you
So
find
now,
Burundi has been given.
for example, if Rwanda is to be deployed, what side would they be on? Would they be on the side of the standby forces of East Africa, or they would be for their brothers?
That's where they must all withdraw. If it were possible, they must all withdraw, and we send in a standby force that is supposed to pacify Congo. That is the only way that will be solved. Short of that, there will be suspicions from all corners across the different East African countries.
All right, Jackie, just getting back to you. We live in an era of transnational terrorism, that you have Boko Haram in Nigeria, but the violence is transnation. It is in Kenya, it is everywhere. That you have ADF, for example, in Congo, but the work that they do and the destruction that they cause, cuts across. That you have Afghanistan, for example, in, is it Iraq? But, like the work they do is cut across.
That's ISIS. You're referring to ISIS.
Okay, I think one of those. So,
Yeah,
but
actually, I think ADF confirmed attachment to.
It has links with ISIS.
All right.
Yeah.
But the point is, the era we live in is one of transnational terrorism. So, that's the solution to this threat, because terrorism is a threat that I think goes to the core of our existence as humanity. So, do you think that partly the solution to the ADF and the M23 rebels lies in the East African Federation? Because if you recall Woodrow Wilson, who was USA president, when he came up with the idea of League of Nations, which now evolved to the United Nations, his idea was the collective security agenda. But our approach as East Africa looks like the more we incorporate in member states, we just expand on our conflicts. Now we are considering having Somalia join. But Somalia is coming in with a whole difficult conflict in Mogadishu. So are we approaching the Federation from a right perspective?
Do you think South Sudan joining the ESC has, or do you think the ESC in its original composition has contributed to the peace in South Sudan?
Perhaps that's a good question, because South Sudan up to today, it is just, I think, a few months ago that they removed the taxes on visas. So, and that is why because you know that it's a protocol that member states should have free movement and all that. That no country should charge a fee for visas. But South Sudan, until I think about 2 months ago, was charging member states a fee. So, and I was saying that first we aren't ready because we still need revenue. And that's why I'm asking you that, have we followed the right procedures in terms of having member states join? Because he's speaking of deploying our standby force, but is it a ready force? That is my question.
Okay, I think there are about 5 questions in that whole question. 1, are we following procedure? I think we are.
Are we? Because how then was South Sudan admitted when they're still charging member states a fee on visa?
I think that's a minor internal issue.
So we have disregard for procedure
with South Sudan. I wouldn't call it that. There has to be, before something, if they feel like that's a concern for them, there has to be organizational or institutional proceedings on how to get away from that position. You understand? For me, that's how I would take it. Because if a state says, I would like to be part of the East African community, but then I still have issues to take care of, yeah, I think that's perfectly okay. It's not that they have rebelled or against existing protocol or procedure, but I think that's something that is debatable. However, on the question of terrorism, standby force and all of that, I think the East African community is on the right track. The reason I asked you about whether you think the composition of East Africa has contributed to the peace in South Sudan is because I wanted to point you to a success story. South Sudan is not exactly stable, but the participation of Uganda and the East African community in general, and I think one of the countries that I think has played a key role is Kenya. I think has contributed to to the progress of the peace. It's not something that is going to be achieved even in 10 years, but I think having Uganda or the East African community has been something instrumental for for the progress of stability, right from the separation of the Sudans
of Khartoum
and Juba. Uganda had a very active role, and I think that's leading to stability. So I am very optimistic about Somalia's coming on board. I think Kenya will bear the biggest burden for the fact that they share boundaries, but also having Uganda and the experience we've had with the Sudan, I think there might be agreeable, actionable points. By the way, you must have noticed that most of what really leads to this peace never comes public because these are very classified and diplomatic issues, if I could summarize it like that. So am I optimistic about EAC helping with terrorism? I think that's a more reason we actually have to grow bigger. When we confirmed our intentions to exploit the oil resource, that's when we heard that ISIL had actually arrived in the Rwenzori region. So, in my mind, I think it's the biggest factor that has changed Uganda's position on DRC, and now we are going in to partner on infrastructural projects because we have to make sure that the Albertine region is secure. And we've been lucky enough that, on the other hand, we have DRC for the first time being able to consider being part of the East African community. So I think what needs to be done going forward is how we make our partnership as the member states a little bit tighter and more responsible. I think to have DRC for the longest time, I think it's been captive of so many forces, right from when the boundaries were drawn, because of course there were very many interests, and I think there was a point that Kennedy made that I felt I needed to respond to. Even if we had a standby force, if it doesn't have a compound perspective of what the objective is, a country like Rwanda and its history might not trust a standby force to know how desperate they need to be free or safe from the genocide militias. So, from my understanding, DRC doesn't have so many choices by virtue of being what it is and its history. Now, for me as an individual, I believe DRC is not impossible to fix, but it's strategically important for many and big actors for it to be in the chaos in which it is.
Thank you, Jakie.
And why do I say that? Because that way, it's a base for so many political interests. If ISIL shows up and is in the region where the oil resource is, that's an important way of keeping Kampala busy. Yeah. Now, I'm a person who subscribes to the notion that international cooperation is not something driven on friendship. That's a face we give it. It's actually driven on competition. So if I have a way of keeping Kampala and Kigali busy against each other, or busy operating in the opposite direction of development and progress, I have every reason to keep DRC the way it is.
Okay.
So, which is where I would agree with his solution if it was applicable.
Okay, applicability. Isaac, let me come back to you. The DRC joined the EAC community less than a year ago. I think it was March this year. And the narrative out there was that, oh, wow, there's a 90 million population coming into our fraternity. It means it's much more a platform for trade and market and things like that. But critics have argued and said that there were sinister motives because DRC joined the EAC. It was so quick. I mean, they skipped so many procedures. So the critics have said that DRC's joining the EAC was quickened to legitimize the illicit actions in Eastern Congo. That now, because they're part of the EAC, therefore they are bound by these protocols, the Free Trade Protocol, the Free Movement Protocol. So if tomorrow someone from Uganda goes to DRC, I mean, it is hard it's hard to prosecute them because there is a sort of the protocols that bind us together. So what's your comment on that? Do you think that the DRC joining the EAC was on legitimate grounds, or the underlying interests, the sinister motives could have led to that? Then two, let's compare SADC and EAC, because you know that in 2015, I think DRC Congo had the same situation that they're having now. And I recall Jakie, who was Tanzania's president at the time, he said that it took big boys in the room to address the issue, meaning it took SADC, which has Angola, South Africa, Tanzania,
Zimbabwe.
Yeah, so SADC had capacity to flush out DRC Congo, to flush out M23. Does EAC, with all these competing interests, Rwanda wants this, Uganda wants this, do you have the backbone to pacify DRC Congo? So just compare for us those two communities, SADC and EAC, then also DRC's first joining the EAC. Were there sinister motives?
Thank you. On the motivation for DRC to join the East African community, I think strongly that it was legitimate and therefore justified, because I think the DRC then realized that it was better to join a more organized political and economic interstate organization, so that it could also tap into the combined capacity and bolster its internal capacity.
Is
as a
EAC
country
more organized than SADC? Even speak about the economic
certainly not
benefits that could come.
Certainly not,
Yeah.
but you also that you have to examine a whole host of other factors altogether. But back to the DRC and the East African community, I think it's a good thing for it. You've commented correctly that one of the factors was the nearly the 100 million population of the DRC.
Yes.
That's a very huge market base for the region. And I think DRC also, individual as a state, it stands to benefit from the association of the larger composition and the member states of the East African community. In terms of the political association, but also the economic ties. It's not good to be isolated, in some sort of territory with neighbors who more or less do the same things, but you're standing on the peripheries. I think it's better for the DRC to merge with the rest of the countries in the Greater Lakes region, so that it can bolster both its internal but also external interests in politics and in the economic sense. Now, your second question is to do with the latest intervention by the East African community in the DRC.
Vis-a-vis SADC's intervention in 2015,
vis-a-vis
2011?
Yes.
Around there, yeah.
I think the initiative is welcome. But like I stated, like I observed earlier, if we do not correctly investigate and understand the motivation of the conflict, then we are going to keep on repeating the mistake of prescribing a long solution. How? In my view, the conflict in DRC is precipitated by political factors, and all the actors are political. Therefore, SADC initiated, an effort. It flashed out M23, but this is just a couple of years later. M23 is back. Yeah. It's strong. It is threatening the entire core on which the state of the DRC rests, to the extent that now we are mobilizing a new force to go and intervene and restore sanity, political sanity and peace. So, for me, I think that you cannot deploy guns to silence guns and then achieve lasting and durable peace. The solution would be to undertake dialogue, political dialogue for that matter, a roundtable dialogue for all the various political actors in the conflict. Firstly, internal. That is the M23 and the Congolese government. Then, through a negotiated settlement, that's the only way we can have a lasting solution to that crisis. When you said that you're going to, launch a full-scale military offensive against the M23, granted, you've succeeded. 5 years down the road, the M23, somehow, like it has always done, they were flashed into Uganda. Then after 3 or 4 years, we hear they are reassembling. Then before you know it, they have captured Goma. They are now making, offensives to capture more cities and move deeper into Congo. I think with the strategic view of taking over Kinshasa eventually and establishing their own government. So you see that we are working in a vicious cycle. Yeah. And which is not a good thing. We're expending resources, time is moving, but also we are not achieving the strategic objective of restoring peace, durable, lasting peace. Yeah. So the Congolese people are entitled to an environment of prosperity, freedom, but also peace. Yeah. So for me, I think the international community, working closely with the East African community, should draw out some sort of legal framework with targets and specific timelines. If you're going to intervene militarily, yes, granted. How about the prevailing political contestations that are historical, by the way, and long-standing between what Jackie correctly pointed out, between the aggrieved ethnic communities, for example, the Banyamulenge, as against the Congolese state? What are you going to do about it? That's a political question. You cannot resolve it militarily by the force of arms. Therefore, there is urgent need for the leadership of the East African community to consider that reality and work closely, in close collaboration with the international community, and serve as guarantors to a political process that can, through dialogue, resolve those long-standing issues as between the major protagonists of the conflict, have a political resolution to the crisis, integrate the M23. I hear of talks already. I don't know the progress into the main military composition and structures of the DRC. If there are grievances these people are raising, let them be addressed. However, lastly, as a bare minimum, I do not subscribe to the notion, and I take very strong exception to the view that, we should now intervene because the former commander of our land forces, the first son, he tweeted and said the M23 should be supported in their fight against the Congolese government. I take great exception to that position because as a bare minimum, what we should do is to keep Congo as one basic indivisible unit. It's the only way we are going to procure long-lasting and durable peace. But now for you to say you're intervening, and then you're intervening on the side of the rebels, that already raises now issues of trust, which have also been long-standing. That's some of the reasons as to why the conflict is not ending. So if you're intervening, intervene with integrity. Intervene as an impartial and neutral player.
Be an arbiter, moral.
Be an arbiter, yes. Mediate peace.
Thank you. Sandra, let me just come back to you. I'll just borrow a phrase from Isaac. They are back and they are strong, but aren't capitalize on their strength. Is it peculiar to you, or is it normal that a rebel outfit has this much power and strength? If you look at the military weapons that they're using, you look at these guys are well facilitated. So is it peculiar that a military outfit is this powerful, or there are some unsaid forces that are supporting these guys very strongly, giving them militias, giving them all these weapons to fight? Are they on their own, or they have support from? Because whereas we are inviting him, and I think him, have invited international players, but do they come with clean hands? I don't know.
Personally, I would say they are not on their own. I feel like there's a force that is backing them up because these are the same people who left Congo some years back and they came to Uganda as refugees, right? And we expected our government, the Ugandan government, to, take care of them and make sure they are not armed, they are okay. But then after some years, we again hear that they are back, they are armed. Like, how do the refugees escape from Uganda? Because I'm sure they were supposed to be in Uganda. Actually, right now, they're supposed to be somewhere in the refugee camps being taken care of. But then after a few years, we hear that they are back and they're armed. So I wouldn't want to blame the Ugandan government. Maybe they were, I don't want to say careless, but yeah, maybe they were careless and they made the M23 guys escape. I don't know if they really escaped or what. But then I would want to blame Uganda to a smaller extent for what is happening, because these are people that they, as a country, as the host, they actually had to labor to make sure these guys are here and they are not armed, to ensure that there is peace actually in Congo, because that was the major point of them hosting them this side. Yeah, so I want to blame Uganda to a smaller extent. And the question would be, where are they getting the machineries they have? Who is supplying them? And if I wouldn't blame anyone who stands up and says it's Uganda, because these people, I'm sure they made their first move from here because they escaped from here. We do not know, and now, of course, through the borders. And how would they just escape like that? To expect the borders to be fully guarded to ensure that the people getting in and out of the country are maybe monitored or something like that. But then you hear that the same people whom we had hosted are again back and armed. So I would really not, I wouldn't side with someone who says we are blaming Uganda for everything that is happening. But again, I would have that question mark, and I'm like, where are they getting the machineries from? And of course, these are not like
Can
one
I
or
add
two
something?
guns.
In 1 minute.
One minute. I think it's a mistake to measure military strength by machines and possessions. There's someone who once said that a soldier is not made of his body. A soldier is made of his mind. I don't know if you ever had an operation that ousted Kabila the first time, before I think it was called Operation Chitosa, something like that, where Kigali, the first time when they were removing, I think Mobutu, it took them 7 months to fight up to Kinshasa. That when they realized Kabila had turned against them, now Kabila as a replacement of Mobutu, they said 7 months is a very long time. You know what they did? They mounted an operation in which Rwandan soldiers hijacked a plane that was going to that place from Goma to, that was coming from Goma to Kinshasa, rather to that, actually it was going to Kinshasa, but then they diverted it on gunpoint. And it landed in a place called, if I remember the name correctly, the Congolese name's a bit are a problem for me to cram or to record in my head. I think it was called Chitosa. So the plane landed there, and what the Rwandan military strategy was, they needed a place where it was shorter to get to Kinshasa. So they had cut the 7 months journey into days just by hijacking a plane. So for me, I wouldn't fear the M23 by which machines they're fighting. It is with what will. With what will. And then, if you ask me, I think it's extremely justified, and I think this responds to his concerns or his position. The reason they're fighting, or the reason they have said have made them rise today, is because the last agreement they had, the DRC government failed on them.
Okay.
Failed on commitment, which comes down to the weakness of the state in DRC.
All right, thank you. Gimei, just as we take a short commercial break, let me just put this question to you. Isaac says we must explore diplomatic options. I think the government in Kinshasa took certain diplomatic stands. For example, the ambassador of Rwanda to DRC was, I think, suspended. I'm not sure if the Ugandan ambassador was also suspended. I'm not sure. But a very unique incident happened about 2 weeks ago where a DRC jet fighter breached international airspace of Rwanda. So a country that is taking diplomatic action towards addressing this issue is now being accused of having their jet fighter landing in another country. Are there some provocations that, because DRC is the home of the conflict, but again their actions could speak otherwise? Why would they send a jet fighter? I don't know. Where? Are there underlying communications that they're trying to send to maybe Rwanda or other country that we can fight back?
I must say that was unfortunate. For if indeed the Congolese sent their jet fighter and it landed in Rwanda, it was quite unfortunate because it could spark off a war. Remember, you're already suspicious that Rwanda is supporting the M23. You see how people have been demonstrating in Eastern Congo about Uganda and Rwanda.
Yes, so and even the European Union.
Yeah. But by implication, you would think that if it is indeed true, so then Rwanda, you're giving Rwanda the opportunity to be able to arm these people even better, to be able to come against your government in that regard. Then the other issue I would like to put out correctly is that, yes, there is indeed need to pacify the Congo. And I believe that the East African community is trying in that regard. And when Sandra pointed out that Rwanda cannot allow the East African standby force to operate alone, I would tend to disagree to that extent, to some extent, because the East African standby force, if it has been agreed upon, even with Rwanda as a member, by all means, Rwanda cannot go ahead to operate or to turn its back against this agreement that they have subjected themselves to.
Oh, wow.
So
haven't they done so before? when they were chairing, I think the Is it African Union? No. When Rwanda was chairing, I think the EAC, we passed, I think, the free movement protocol. Just less than 2 months later, Rwanda closed its borders.
You see,
So,
I think then that calls for some action from amongst the other member countries. Because if a member country goes against a certain position that has been agreed by the rest, so as other remaining member countries, you must come together and take action against this given member. So I believe that to that extent, there was a bit of laxity. If Rwanda did what it did, and the other member countries just watched on. So the other member countries should have done something about it. Because at the end of the day, we must be a common people that is supposed to be moving somewhere. And if Congo is the problem, and this problem is not cured, it could spill over to the rest of the other countries. So we would indeed urge that let the force be strengthened. Let it not be about a certain country going inside there. Say, for example, Uganda entering in to hunt for the ADF, then Rwanda going in to do something, then Burundi. At the end of the day, you will find that even Tanzania will want to be involved because there are resources there. Kenya is already on ground. As we speak, they have already sent their troops in there. So you're turning Congo into a battlefield, and at the end of the day, it is at the expense of the ordinary people. The population must grow. This is a young country. I don't think Congo is older than 70 years since it got independence. So by all means, we must work towards pacifying this given region for the purposes of ensuring that trade goes on and this given country also grows with its resources.
okay, just lastly.
For purposes of clarity.
1 second. Do you think that Eastern DRC is stateless? Is there state presence in Goma, or there's no state presence?
You see, state presence can only be felt if the state is able to control its territory. So if you have rebel groups operating in DRC, so by all means, the state is not as effective to that extent. So you find that Eastern DRC is not as governable as maybe Kinshasa, where the state sits. So it is up to the DRC government and the neighboring countries to ensure that DRC becomes a very effective government so that it can be able to control territory.
Lastly, has the geographical size that DRC sits on, has it aided part of its territory being stateless? For example, you look at Kinshasa, then you look at Goma. The distance, perhaps the geographical size of DRC has played a role.
Yeah.
That you have a government in Kinshasa, but you expect them to administer governance in Goma, which is so far away.
I believe they are
the size.
I believe they are bigger countries in terms of size. However, they have effectively done with that because they have systematically built their systems to be able to control this. I don't want to give you the examples of China,
US.
India, US, and others because they belong to a different continent. Leaving it to our African continent, you would find that if DRC had been on the right track, effectively put in place governments that would succeed each other with the systems left in place, DRC would be able to govern itself. The geographical area would not be a problem because it has the resources. Maybe they would be able to exploit their resources and be able to sell them and be able to make their country governable. So it's not about size, but I think the failure to build systems over time is what has caused rebel groups to operate in certain areas and making it ungovernable.
Jackie, I'll begin with you after the break. But yeah, let's allow our viewers to take a short commercial break. And thank you for watching the Youth Roundtable. But above all, we know that you have comments and opinions. There is a comment section below this YouTube channel. Give us your opinions, give us your comments. If you agree with any of us or disagree, let us know in that comment section. See you shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back, viewers. Jackie, you had your hand up, yes, but as you respond to your concern, I have a question for you. Let's speak about the refugee spillover. I know Uganda has or operates an open door policy, sort of, in that, you know, we welcome refugees. So as we examine the effect of refugee spillover in Uganda, perhaps you want to interrogate how this is going to exert more pressure on the already limited resources. But also, does Uganda play to the gallery? Because, I mean, then it casts us in very good light. Then we can negotiate and lobby for more international aid and all those things. I mean, because we have a whole refugee base to take care of, it makes our negotiation on the international scene much more easier. I don't know. How does the whole refugee thing play over with the conflict in DRC?
Okay. The reason I had my hand up was about your response to his comment on Rwanda having closed its borders after agreeing to certain protocols of free movement and things like that. I think all of these things come down to what are the circumstances. And again, but that's probably not even the major reason I wanted to make this comment, but it's that even the reasons that had brought us to that place, that Rwanda needed to close its borders, were still in the DRC. And how? Uganda thought Rwanda wanted to go to war with it, and Rwanda thought Uganda had to go with it. So eventually, when the commander-in-chief of the Republic of Uganda orders an inquiry of a possibility of a conspiracy, actually the CLF, the former CLF, finds out it was a conspiracy inside Uganda, but then they were using DRC as the base. Yeah? So how do we move forward from such possibilities? Is having is East Africa, the East African community as an institution, enough for that? My answer would be, how willing are we? Because the next time, whether it's Rwanda that feels insecure about Uganda, or it's South Sudan feeling insecure about Uganda, it doesn't matter what our written agreements are. They'll still do. They'll still act in the interest of their own safety. Yeah. So if and I wanted to say that if I'd been on a senior panel, I probably wouldn't have made this comment. But I felt like we as the youth need to backtrack and do flipbacks of a flipback analysis and view of these things or of such developments. So in my position, I wouldn't have expected anything less from Rwanda, given the circumstances. Even if it was Uganda that had closed the borders, I think it would have been very justified, given the circumstances. On the question of refugees, I think we like, there is a general tendency of leaning towards monetary interest in everything. But I think if someone like Bobi Wine was president of the Republic of Uganda, I don't think we would have indulged in refugees as much as we do, because his convictions are a bit different from the president's convictions. I think the president's, right now, the president of the Republic of Uganda runs an open door policy to refugees. I think it's less to do with the international PR and all these things that we like to attach them. Yes, they're advantageous. There's no question about it. But I think he himself has been a refugee before, and he appreciates in his own words, at least, I am convinced that I think that takes precedence to every other interest that comes with hosting the refugees. I think on many occasions he has made statements regarding the African plight, and why he's like so convinced of the need for African countries to be receptive and accepting to Africans and being like helpful to one another. And he himself, I think, grounds his position in what Julius Nyerere did for his struggle to come to power. So I think that takes primary position in the construct of the reasons as to why he adopts. So he has an open door policy to African refugees. On the part of the PR and the resources, I think we're still advantaged. Yes, there will be pressure. That's what comes with increase in populations. But I believe and feel like we have state capacity, we have human resource capacity, we have negotiation advantages on how we cope with the influx of the refugees.
All right, thank you. Isaac, let me just come back to you. Perhaps we could delve into international humanitarian law, which I think requires states really to truly operate sort of on the principle of Ubuntu. You know, someone needs a home, first give them shelter, then address anything else after.
Yes.
But let's examine the long-lasting or the implications of this, because when you hear words that certain locals, for example, in Uganda say, they say that the refugees actually have access to better social services than them themselves, the nationals. All right. So is this refugee spillover a recipe for conflict, for example, in Uganda? But also, what would be your foreign policy on this? Because some have argued that the member states that are having conflict should deal with their issues. If you fail to govern your country, why should you extend the burden to us? But also, even if you're to extend the burden, let it come with some resources. Okay? We are going to harbor your people, yes. But your government should commit resources to supporting these people. Because these people are going to thrive on our natural resources, on our healthcare, on our schools. But they are nationals of your country. So what approach should you take? Should these countries where the refugees are running from, should they contribute resources to the host countries? That is one. Then two, is this a recipe for conflict in other countries?
Thank you. To begin with, Uganda has a strong reputation as a host nation for refugees globally, and I think we've been consistent in that approach from the advent of the coming into power of the NRM regime. I don't know if for the reason she cited, they are a motivation for that decision, but maybe not. So, with respect to the strong public sentiment among the citizens that, the government's approach to have a warm reception for the refugees is a problem. I think this is triggered by the grievances within our public, our internal, it's a function of the internal grievances, political grievances, economic and social as a country. The citizens feel that because maybe services are not being extended to them as would be expected of a bona fide citizen of a country, that instead the refugees stand maybe to benefit highly than they actually do as citizens. So I think it could be illegitimate in that sense because it's official government policy. I think it is misinformed on the part of the citizens. But the issue that has to be fixed is if government has, adopted the policy to take on refugees, can it first effectively deal with the internal issues of the day as between government and the citizens in a healthy way, so that then the citizens also can have a positive attitude towards the reception of the refugees. Number two, I understand that under international law, the government has the obligation to help, communities that are affected by either violence or are being, forced out of their territory by the force of arms or conflict. The government has discharged that responsibility, I should say, over time very well and consistently. But that cannot answer the question, why are we having an influx of refugees over time, consistently? South Sudan, Rwanda in 94, Congo for all the time the conflict has persisted.
Somalia.
Then there is Somalia, 2007 in Kenya. I think it's only with the exception of Tanzania, of all the people that we share frontiers with, that we've not experienced the problem. So we need to interrogate what's the root cause of this issue. And may I point out again
The political question.
my earlier observation. It's the political question because
So
Africa...
should Uganda negotiate with these member states and say that, guys, look here, we are going to welcome your refugees, yes, but send something?
Before Uganda,
Or we should shoulder the burden as a country?
Before Uganda undertakes any of those negotiations, what is important first
Is addressing.
is that we address the root problem. You see, jurisdictions like Europe, for example, or South America, or even Asia for the greatest part, there is no, and the exception is now in Europe because of the current Ukraine-Russia conflict. But post the Second World War era, you've not witnessed an influx of refugees flooding another country, crossing the border. You've not seen such a problem in South America, in spite of all the other host of problems that they have, social and political. Now, why Africa? See, we are going back to the political questions that have been long-standing. In Africa, it's not, for example, out of the ordinary for two political actors to disagree, and as a resultant effect, a whole population of 50 million also they are displaced. They are crossing borders into, and we have failed to put in place institutional mechanisms, even at the level of the Organization of African Unity, to resolve these conflicts. Now, organizations like the EU, the organization of the EU, European Union, the organization for the South American countries. Yes, countries acknowledge their internal political stresses and complexities, but at the institutional and structural level, they do everything possible to see that they forestall interstate conflict. If there is to be a conflict, let it be internal and managed at that level. So the other countries come in to support.
Thank you.
And then have the conflict resolved. So if we do not address that institution and structure problem, then this the refugee crisis is not ending anytime soon.
Okay, thank you. Sandra, just let me get back to you. Perhaps we would, let me attempt to play the devil's advocate, that we could benefit from the crisis as a country, that there is a refugee spillover, and perhaps there is some benefit that could come from it, the international donations and things like that. Well, of course, that's premising on the values of Ubuntu, that when someone needs a home, at least first give them a home. But how can the locals see the benefit of refugees if even the posho and beans that the refugees feed on is being gotten from outside the country? But at least if there was a semblance of an economic benefit, that the posho supplies, the beans being supplied to these refugee camps, is gotten from within the domestic suppliers. But even that comes from, I think, I don't know, World Food Program. I don't know where they get it from. Apparently our own portion is not, quality enough. So do you think that the local population see the benefit of the refugees being part of their country, or their mind is tilted towards only the negative, that these guys are here and they want to compete for resources, for land and all these things? So how best can government make the local population appreciate that these are our brothers and sisters?
I think first and foremost, the government should, cater for the local people, like the Ugandans. Make sure, if let's say that the refugees are being given food, because if you can take a scenario from what happened during the COVID-19, the struggles of getting food and all that, that was food that was produced from here, but still it was a struggle for the local people to get that food. And then when we get refugees maybe from out, you can't tell me that the same government that was actually struggling to give food to the people, their very own, can actually be able to feed the maybe thousands of refugees that have come from somewhere else. So I actually think it's okay for them to get the support from the World Food Programs and all that, because I think Uganda as its own cannot cater for both the local people and the refugees at the same time. Yeah, so I think it's actually okay if they can get maybe food, the portion, the beans and everything to cater for the refugees. But then just to make it seem like it's fair and all that, the government should take it upon itself to make sure that by the time maybe the refugees are coming to the country, they are actually also catering for the people in Uganda. They do not leave them to maybe have this mindset of all those people are just coming to maybe drain us and exploit us and all that, and there's nothing we are gaining from them. They're just coming here to occupy our spaces, and they actually get better treatment than us, because that's what most of them say. They get, I don't know if they get monthly, there's
Stipend.
yeah. So Ugandans actually complain about that. That like, we be here in Uganda, we have nothing to eat, and there's a refugee somewhere. They are actually getting so comfortable in our own country. Yeah, so I think the government should take it upon itself to make sure that the people, their very own, are actually okay before bringing in the other people. And it's actually okay if they can make it clear that yes, these people are here, but we are also getting support from outside. It's not like we are doing it single-handedly. No. At least I think that people will understand if they're like, yes, they're here, but we're also getting support from somewhere else too. At least make sure they are okay.
Yeah, just about the support. Most of it seems to be coming from the international players, like the global community. But do you think that the countries, for example, like DRC, should have the conviction to say that, guys, this is my contribution for what you're doing for our people? Do you think that these countries should be able to shoulder part of the burden? Because it is from their lack
I think
of
it's
governance.
unrealistic.
It's not
to
realistic.
expect that.
Not
By the time the concept of refugee exists, that because
They're
there's
going through a lot in there.
exactly there are complexities.
They
They
are going through a
become
lot,
misfits.
but
They are overwhelmed.
the countries are not poor.
No.
The countries are having political issues and
that's the same thing that you was trying to address, the political questions.
Might have
No. I think that's assuming ceteris paribus.
All the factors.
All other factors staying constant, which is not the reality. Because politics exists because some things are going to be out of the constant. Yeah. So I wouldn't expect, even if it was Uganda, by the way, and Uganda has refugees somewhere in Kenya or why are you responding like that? Yeah? So by the time people become refugees, somehow there is a connotation to it that the state where the country where they're coming from is incapable of caring for them, and
okay.
You see, you can't expect someone that is running away,
or
a government that is trying to survive by maybe looking for resources to fight off the people who are going to prioritize giving resources to another country to take care of its own people. You'd look at a country like Congo. Right now, with all the problems they have, fine, they have the resources, but there are other problems and there are priorities to their budget. And funding people who have moved out of the country could not be a priority in that given case. So in that regard, I don't see it realistic in a way that maybe their home countries should be able to facilitate people who have escaped from their country. I think the countries
Not
would be
escaped,
happy.
they've been forced out.
Yeah, they have been forced out. They're escaping.
Because of, actually, that is an indictment
Survival.
on the central government.
Yeah.
They're afraid to protect the lives and property of their citizens, and these citizens have been forced to leave the country.
Moses, point of
So,
information.
A government that has
DRC
failed.
does not even have proper documentation of who its citizens are. Yeah? So, and that's part of the identity problem in the DRC because they can't document them. So, if someone, if for example, how would DRC risk saying that we are going to contribute to, we are going to contribute resources to the welfare of people from DRC? What if Kenyans come and claim they are also people from DRC?
Yeah, then they all send money to Uganda to take
know,
care
it's
of
Just to quick thing.
No, just so that
You see,
yes, I want him to pass.
When I say that they're escaping from war. I don't know which side may have meted out this given war against them or something. But like she has said, you can't expect a government of DRC to come and construct maybe a hospital somewhere at the border point for
that
its
it
people,
failed to construct back
that
home.
it failed to construct back home. And perhaps maybe this is the very reason why the rebels are fighting, that maybe there are not enough
Yes.
resources back home.
That's precisely what they're fighting.
But then, okay, how do you explain, for example, Uganda constructing roads in DRC Congo?
You see, Uganda, and I would like to say this in a way that giving the government a benefit of a doubt, in the sense that the Ugandan government may be preparing this region for trade in that given regard. However, there are voices that will tell you that we are constructing these roads to fight off the ADF. But by all means, if the ADF is weakened, these roads must stay in place. And what next for a place that has flushed out the ADFs? So economic growth must take charge. So in that given regard, Uganda is doing a good initiative of constructing the given roads for future purposes. When the ADF are history, so Uganda should be able to carry out trade with its
I think
neighbors.
that, yeah,
Interesting.
I
Trade.
agree with him.
Very interesting.
No, actually, this is a very focused initiative with focused objectives. One is security, like he has said. He has talked about the undoing the craft of the ADF. That's number one. Number two, it is goodwill to DRC. For the longest time, we have opted for force as an option to fence off insecurity and instability. So, to facilitate trade doesn't end just at trade. It's also a defense shield to the oil wells. But also in future, you know that in the same Lake Albert, DRC has oil on its side of the border. It has oil.
Yeah.
So if you secure that region, you're also buying DRC's will to consider using the oil pipeline that comes from Uganda to
Tanga.
to Tanga in Tanzania. Talk about the PR aspect of it, or the international relations of it. That in the future, when probably the international community has issues or with Uganda and the DRC, Uganda stands a chance of claiming that we have invested not just interest, but we have also made investments into the peace and stability of the DRC as a means to secure our own territories. So this, I think, has multiple faces. The initiative of infrastructure development with DRC. But for me, what is primary in it is the goodwill. For the first time, we have changed from thinking that we must protect ourselves from DRC. We are now investing in protecting
DRC.
the DRC for our own sake.
All right, Gimei, just as you conclude your point, were you done?
Yeah.
I think you're done. Yes, Isaac,
I just wanted to.
I know you have a comment, but as you do so, I want us to explore a bit of the international laws. I know that, for example, Uganda is a signatory to the Maputo Protocol. That was exactly enshrined on the principle of let's protect the rights of women and children, basically. I can't imagine the level of human rights violations happening in DRC, more so to the women and to the children. So as you make your comment, could you interrogate for us the strength and weakness of international laws? Because what is happening in DRC, the perpetrators should be candidates for serious prosecution. But we haven't seen the international community come out to, okay, well, there is MONUSCO, yes, but the work they're doing cannot be tangibly seen. The African Union is just quiet about this. I know they did comment, but I don't know, they are just quiet. Someone had imagined that because the DRC president is the chair of the African Union, perhaps the African Union could be better mobilized so we can have more member states. I don't know. Let's think about the international laws. Are they strong enough? But also the institutions themselves, like the African Union and the United Nations, do they have that capacity? Or the international scene, like someone said, is a self-help system. Everyone is there for their own.
Let me just make a comment on the refugee crisis and if it is justified for
Uganda to construct roads in DRC?
No, not that.
Or
for countries
with grappling
with the conflicts, and as a result, refugees have got to cross over to other host countries as to whether they should make
financial contribution
support, whether financial or otherwise, in order to facilitate the refugees in their territories. I think we should not narrow the discussion to Congo. Let's broaden the context a bit. I think it would be immoral for a country to now contribute in support to another country that is hosting its citizens to facilitate their general being outside its borders. I don't know if you get the logic, but to me, before even we go to the law and whether they have the capacity to actually support, I think it's immoral. It only goes to show that you lack capacity to keep your house in order, to organize your internal affairs and manage your own systems to cater for the citizens on your land, on your territory. So I think that to me is the primary reason I would oppose that. But also, like they have all sufficiently observed, if you already overwhelmed by a conflict, how then do you expect to now begin contributing to the welfare of people?
Just something funny I've thought about. I think your position or that proposition assumes like extreme goodwill of man, which is impossible, which is why we moved from League of Nations to the United Nations. Someone else would say, I'm tired of this tribe in this country. Let me fight it. I can construct another nation in another country and then keep supplying support there. A nation can do that. So I think your proposition or that idea would comes from a position that trusts the goodwill of man. But there is very minimal.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, goodwill.
So just to conclude on that point, even if the support was actually forthcoming, it would be a simplistic, very simplistic and immoral, so to say. Now, regarding the international laws and institutions and their capacity to help to resolve all these conflicts. International law is quite a complex, animal altogether. Because the ultimate responsibility of enforcement rests with the
sovereign states.
The sovereign states. So you rely more on their goodwill, which is largely political, to ensure that you enforce, respect, honor, and commit to the dictates of those accords or protocols, whatever agreements they have entered in unison with other member states. Now, And you see, it keeps on taking me back to my early observation. But in the context of Africa, we have a very serious institutional crisis. In the sense that the Organization for African Unity, I think it is failed to even deliver on its basic mandate, which is to achieve unity, not just unity, but purposeful unity for the African continent. But also, there cannot be purposeful unity if there is no stability, first and foremost. There is no peace, which factor now guarantees other variables like economic prosperity and good governance. So, if the composition, the totality of the 54 states that comprise the Organization for African Unity cannot build sufficient capacity to address the internal, issues that continue to plague the African states, then I think we should begin to rethink either the current model that is wrong, or it is the question of lack of, genuine goodwill from the political actors, the heads of these various countries that comprise the Organization for African Unity. I stated earlier on, look at Europe post-World War. You have not seen an interstate conflict with the exception of the Russia now Ukraine crisis. And even then, it's some sort of ideological, differences that have precipitated the conflict. You've also not seen an internal conflict amongst those states, like a civil war of sorts. Look at the African continent. I don't know how many countries are now mad with civil conflicts, but we have the Organization for African Union. So one wonders, what is the real mandate of the Organization for African Union if it cannot aid the member states to resolve such conflicts? But like I said, most times on the various discussions we have about these issues, people try to escape it or dodge the reality. But the problem of Africa, at the core of it, is really politics. Yeah, I think we failed to come to terms that we can disagree, but do politics in a civil manner. In Africa, political disagreement, triggers violence or conflict as between people. And before you know it, the ramifications are too widespread that they're involving a host of other countries altogether. Before you know it, the problem is almost not possible to solve. Like you have the Congo issue, like you have the South Sudan issue, like you have the Somalia issue, now Mozambique. The people in Kenya were like, so I think as Africans, number one, it should be a function of our civilization and political consciousness, because it's difficult to have functional political systems in a community that is uncivilized. So first, we need to check that our civilization, but secondly, it should also inform our political consciousness and the manner in which we manage and execute our politics. Then from that, we can move on to the institutional organization and putting into place robust systems and structures that can help to resolve these conflicts as and when they emerge. And the most interesting bit is that I think the bulk of this burden or responsibility rests on our shoulders, the youth, because matter of fact is, nature is such a force, it's a phenomenon that we all can't resist. So there is always a new crop of emerging leaders that is coming up. All right. We are coming up to confront these challenges, so it has got to be our deliberate effort to ensure that we guarantee and promise a better Africa for both us, but and also for posterity.
Thank you. Sandra, let me just come back to you. Congo's ruling political party, which is the Union for Democracy and Social Progress, which is Tshisekedi's political party, there are sentiments that are coming in to say that should their political party not respond decisively to Rwanda and Uganda's interventions in the DRC, then they could face a very difficult election up front. And you know that DRC is approaching their general elections very soon. I think in a year or two, they'll be going in for their general elections. So it is expected that the government in Kinshasa is going to take drastic action against any force that is seen to be siding with the M23. And I think they've already begun to do so. They have expelled ambassadors and etc. But what I want you to examine is that just 2 weeks ago, Congolese Protestants were on the streets and they were demanding Tshisekedi to bar Uganda Airlines from flying to DRC. Now, should they feel like their political parties' political life is threatened and they take drastic measures, such as that being proposed by their people, where does that leave Uganda? Because that would mean that we are taking 2 steps economically and 3 steps backwards. Because yes, we'll have the roads to move, but now we cannot make money from our airlines. So how would that play out should DRC's ruling political party see that their political existence is much more important right now and begin to take drastic actions against Rwanda, Uganda, and any other? Where would that leave us as a country?
I think DRC as a country, actually their idea of chasing away the ambassador of Rwanda was a rational decision to me. Basically, that's what I think. And I think they should, I don't know if they can engage more in the dialogues instead of taking rational decisions and maybe chasing away everyone, blocking the airlines and all that. I think that the dialogues can actually work more, because this is supposed to be like a win-win situation. Everyone wants to gain something. The Ugandans this side want to gain something, they're eyeing something maybe in DRC, and Rwanda itself, and even the political party, the ruling party in DRC, should also like think, and I don't know, like they should sit and think of how they will benefit, like what will they gain if they maybe chase all the ambassadors of Uganda and Rwanda from their country. What will come out of it? Will it just spark off another war? Will it like bring another conflict, or will it actually help them calm the situation that is happening? I think that's what they should look about, and I mean that's what they should base on right now, to see if they will actually chasing away the ambassadors I don't think it has advantages. Personally, I don't think so, because now it will bring like another tension, yes, between Rwanda and DRC. So I think that was a rational decision. And then for the Uganda thing, I think they should actually look on it and find out how much they have to benefit from Uganda. Yes.
Yeah. So it has to be a two-way street.
Yeah.
Okay. Gimei, I was actually coming to you.
Yeah, maybe to add on what she has said, where she has pointed to the fact that she does not agree with sending away the Rwandese ambassador. But in my view, I think that is a diplomatic step in that regard, because at least you would avoid the confrontation to that extent. That's why I disagreed with the fact that Congo sent its fighter jet to land on the soils of Rwanda. To that. Then the other bit of the question asked her about whether the political party should first cater for its interests in the time being. I think that would be detrimental to the country as a whole, because when you look at the general trend in Africa, I think there are not so many political parties that survive. So I think if the political party prioritizes its survival at the expense of the country, in the long run it would affect the country. So because this question has existed over decades, if I'm to put it that way, since independence. So there must have been political parties that came in place over time and they have left this problem. So I think the eyes should be set on the problem. How should we resolve it? It should not be about irrational decisions such as suspending Uganda airlines from landing within Congo. So the political party should look, the leaders of that given political party should look beyond this and be able to, if it is supposed to take a diplomatic route, they should settle down and be able to deal with this, not operating under pressure from the protesters that because we must go through a general election, so we must act irrational.
Oh,
So
yeah. Are you done?
that's it.
Okay, thank you. Just let me just keep with you. Uganda has suffered from the principle of vicarious liability. That we have Ugandan officials who, in the International Court of Justice report, are actually mentioned that person ABCD was seen in Congo and they were plundering timber and gold. The ICJ report mentions explicitly the individuals. But the burden, of course, like I said, has been shifted to the country at large. What approach should we take as a country? Should we allow individuals who are high-handed, who we agree that as a country we are going to pacify Congo, but because of their individual interests, they end up plundering gold, plundering timber, and now the country has to pay. So the principle of vicarious liability, should it be reviewed that these individuals who are mentioned, we should go to their bank accounts, get whatever money they have, and repay this debt, rather than us, shouldering the burden of their criminal acts.
Moses, I get you, but I think we miss the bigger picture if we narrow it down to the individuals. First of all, we must interrogate in whose interest were they doing this. So who was supervising them as they were doing this? And is it true that when they planned these resources, they were the primary beneficiaries from this? So if we look at that and be able to identify who their boss was, and the very reason as to why they are walking scot-free without any sanctions against them, so maybe we could resolve that. Then the other aspect I would look at is, I think Uganda has accepted its fault to that extent, and the ICJ has come out with its ruling, and Uganda has agreed to pay the reparations.
Yes.
To that extent. So an eye for an eye would leave this whole world blind to that extent. So in my view, we can find a way of dealing with this, maybe ensuring that we don't have the same things happening. DRC should be made more effective in how it governs its territory, because you can't allow foreign forces to operate within your territory. However much they may have justifiable reasons, because if someone is there for, say for example, Uganda is there to look for the ADF and deal with the ADF, Burundi is there to deal with the dissidents of its government, Rwanda has also entered there, maybe by force. Now Kenya is on ground. So what sort of country will DRC become at the end of the day? So as the youths of Africa, I think we should prioritize building institutions, and to that extent be able to also give direction to our leaders. Build these institutions at the international level. Say, I think Isaac pointed out the bit of the African Union. In West Africa, they had ECOWAS, although right now it is also suffering with a lot of coups, and I think it has been overwhelmed. But if these institutions are empowered to be able to deal with the African problems unique as they come, I believe we can be able to transcend some of these things, and wars, coups, crises like the one in Congo could become a thing of the history.
Wow, thank you. Isaac, as we move towards closing this conversation, let's examine the credibility and the legitimacy of the East African standby force that we intend to deploy. Do you think some forces are going to have to face a conflict of interest? Because there are there are 123 militia groups. Are there countries that will be, because now, if you have a team that is supporting the militia, then now again you're deploying on the East African standby force, which direction are you going to fire your bullets? So do we anticipate a conflict of interest by some member states as we move forward to deploy our standby force to pacify Goma? Will some countries have conflict of interest?
Certainly, that's been a long-standing problem. With respect to the latest developments and the efforts by the combined East African Community Force to pacify Congo, I think it has also begun to emerge because we all know that Rwanda and Uganda previously have been, named adversely by various credible reports, some authored by, international bodies and observers, of having some sort of ulterior motive in the conflict in Congo. So it now waits to be seen if they can this time round keep their integrity and act as credible, impartial, and neutral actors that are deployed in Congo simply to oversee, but also participate in an effort to restore peace. Now, the problem with Rwanda is particularly unique because Rwanda seems to have some sort of peculiar political disagreement with the regime in Kinshasa, owing to the offshoot problem of the genocidal remnants that are harbored in Congo. And I think the East African community has taken the principled decision. I don't know if it's the one that has instigated it or if it's a demand by the Kinshasa regime to keep Rwanda out of the force they are proposing to intervene.
It was a demand from DRC.
But I think if it's been satisfied and met, then it's correct and justified because we need to build goodwill. We need to build trust. But again now, you see the Congo problem is very interesting. Our former commander for land forces is a serving military officer, a son to the sitting president of Uganda, to come out and make, such absurd comment and say it is correct for the rebel group to be supported to fight against the legitimate, sitting government of in Congo, and yet Uganda is contributing troops to the combined military effort to intervene and restore peace.
It is conflicting.
Not
But
only conflicting,
haven't we made similar statements on the Tigray-Ethiopia issue? Anyway, I mean,
you see now that complicates
it
the
seems to be a
affair because
pattern.
I think it operates to destroy the trust that we are desperately trying to build. And it's very important because we are not going to have to resolve this in any other way.
Thank you, Isaac. Our time is fast spent, so I'll try to keep the questions short. Sandra, let me just come to you and just a funny question. Okay, not funny, but well, depending on how you will take it. Our President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, has in the recent past ordained a new status as father of the region, and this was given to him by, actually it was proclaimed by a sovereign president. So does this proclamation, be it official or not official, does it place more responsibility on us as a country, as the father of the region, to actually do more in DRC Congo? So do you think Uganda will end up shielding a bigger burden because of such stature that we have, achieved?
Yeah, I think so, because it actually takes a lot to have such a title. If, let's say, that every country has accepted it and that's what they refer to him as, then I believe Uganda has a bigger role to play. It's like now a father. A father cannot just abandon the kids. So it's like now Uganda is the father or the mother of these other countries, and it has a bigger role to play.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so to whom much is given, much is expected, right?
Yeah.
All right. Just my last question to you, then I will wrap up with her, is that what do these comments by a serving military officer mean for our diplomatic ties? Isaac did mention a couple of them, but the broader implication on the international relations that we have with these member states.
In my view,
does it cast us in bad light?
Yeah, I think that's the right word to use. In my view, these comments are unfortunate, especially if they come in a wake of other comments, say, from other senior serving military officers, because I think it has become a pattern in Uganda. You find that the UPDF spokesperson says something contrary to what maybe the first son tweets. And with regard to Congo, remember even the deputy chief of defense forces had come out and made a comment about flashing out M23 within 24 hours. So it casts a bad light onto us as a country. And I think the government can always find a way of handling that and being able to put things in line to that extent.
Lastly, Jackie, and in 1 minute, is that not so long ago, the government in Kinshasa came out to say that they didn't have money to hold elections. A country that has all these resources, they have, I mean, any resource in the world can be found in Congo. But the government at some point said, actually, we have no money to hold elections. How does this statement from a sitting president, how do you perceive it? You have money, you have resources, gold, then who is exploiting those resources if you have the money to hold elections? So just help us interrogate that, then we shall wrap this up.
You know, resources do not amount to being rich.
Really?
It's one thing to have resources in the ground, and it's another thing to have money in your pocket, because you're not going to give people gold. To run an election. So for me, it is as simple as that. So if it says there is no, they don't have money for elections, that has a lot of implications. Actually, Rwanda's position since the M23 crisis began has been that I think I had the ambassador of Rwanda to the UN saying every time there is going to be an election in the DRC, Uganda and Rwanda have to have problems with. Rwanda has to have a problem with the DRC, or DRC has a problem with Rwanda, because it's like a mechanism of deflecting from what is correct, politically correct for DRC, a way of justifying their state weakness. So I think it is. I don't want to call it unfortunate. I think it's unrealistic for someone who has been in power for as long as Tshisekedi has been, to say that they don't have money for elections. I just believe that whether he likes it or not, there has to be an election. Yeah. Because I think what all the states in the East African community are doing right now is, I think, play careful with the DRC so that whatever else has to break out of the state in which DRC is does not have similar repercussions like it has been in the past. That's my position. But in as far as Tshisekedi's declaration or statement on whether they have managed to run an election or not, I think whether he likes it or not, an election has to happen, and I think it's going to be ensured by the international community.
All right, let's just speak final comments in 30 seconds each. Our time is fast spent, and I'm being signaled that we have to be out of here. So, Isaac, 30 seconds as I move towards Gimei.
Well, all I have to do is to register my profound appreciation for this opportunity. This is my maiden time on the show. I found it quite interesting, and I want to also appreciate my fellow panelists for their insightful opinions. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Jakie. I think my final comment is, first of all, yes, thank you for hosting us, and credit to the other members of the panel. But my thinking is that this entire region, the entire Great Lakes region, by the way, has to change position with DRC. Of course, some countries are more vulnerable to DRC than others, but for a long time we have looked at ourselves as people who are resisting problems coming from within the DRC. I think it's high time we looked beyond DRC as a state and look at what is shouldering DRC, what lies beyond the shoulders of the DRC. And my thinking is that individually as states we're not enough, because DRC's burden is something that its history, its composition, its population quality, its uncoordinated value system, its weak state, its militias, it's all of that tear it apart from being able to solve its own internal issues. So I think we need a bigger body, but on the African continent, not in the international community. Even that won't stop the interests of the international community within the DRC, but I think it establishes trust for the people in the DRC so that they can work with its neighborhood. Because I'm Ugandan, I'm equally offended that DRC cannot protect its territories and therefore I'm unsafe. Yeah. So for me, I would request that the East African community entrusts a body like maybe SADC or another. I don't think I would go for ECOWAS, but a bigger entity to coordinate how we neutralize, because East African community is not enough in the eyes of what is really the problem of the DRC. The East African community needs backing, and that backing has to be with an entity that DRC can trust. And that's why I think SADC can play a role.
Thank you. Sandra?
I'd like to thank you and the entire team for hosting us. It's been a great experience. My first time here, my first time on a talk show. So yeah, it's actually, I've learned a lot. And basically, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Kennedy.
So, my final comments won't differ much from Jakie's, and my parting shots are that DRC should be helped in any way possible to at least have a very effective government to be able to control its territory. Short of that, we the neighbors will have to suffer the consequences of having a weak government in place. And with that, I want to thank you for hosting us, and I want to thank the rest of my colleagues on the panel. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you very much, comrades. Comrade Isaac, Comrade Jackie, Comrade Sandra, and Comrade Kennedy, for sparing the time to be on this week's episode of the Youth Roundtable. Of course, to the technical team, thank you for ensuring that our viewers get this show right on time. Well, my last words are the words of the late Reverend Desmond Tutu, who said that in whatever you do, just do right. If you're going to pacify Congo, do it the right way. Don't go there with other motives. But also, above all, I think the peace in Congo works for all of us. At least that should be the bare minimum. That the peace in DRC serves all of us. It serves humanity. It's the principle of Ubuntu. Well, thank you for sparing the time, our viewers. Have a lovely afternoon. See you next week, same time, same place.